Hello everybody and welcome to another Worship Spotlight. My name is Daniel and today we're talking about doing this. Alright, you join me in the little studio that we've got going on, which is basically just one of my bedrooms in my house. We're using this for virtual church, so all of the live worship that comes on a Wednesday night and a Sunday morning is all shot in here on our camera that's just over there, and it is jam-packed full of stuff. You've got guitars and stuff everywhere, keyboards, microphones, wires, lights, cameras, so it's a little bit crazy in here. But it's a great place to come and sit and have a little chat with you on a Monday morning. The reason we're doing this is because actually there's not a lot of things that we can do as Destiny Church right now in terms of our physical meeting. So what we wanted to do, the idea was, is we want to give you content to be able to watch through the week, even if it's just 5-10 minutes of something. It's nice to be able to connect with you. Whether you're from Destiny Church, whether you're watching this and you are our regulars, or whether you're not, it's just nice that we can give you some content to watch and I can prepare a subject and a song, and hopefully you've been enjoying it. Hopefully you've been singing along with me every week. I really hope so. So today I want to talk about raising of hands in worship. And some of you may be thinking, well, why? That's a really random sort of non-subject. Well, I don't know if you know this. You probably do because we live in the UK. Lots of churches don't raise hands. And lots of churches don't sort of say and speak out things in worship. Lots of churches, and there is nothing wrong with this, stand up and they sing their song that they've got prepared, and then they sit down, and that is their song worship moment. So what I want to do is sort of talk a little bit about, well, why do we raise our hands at our church then? And just a little bit behind it. And this is not a one is better than the other sort of moment, but I thought it'd be a nice little topic for me to talk about my journey from being in a place where I didn't really know that people did raise their hands in church to where I am now, which is me leading worship and encouraging people to lift their hands. I grew up in churches where we didn't do that, and it wasn't something I ever thought about or ever wondered about because I'd never seen it done. We stood up, and I'm not just talking about one church, I'm talking about lots of churches that I went to with friends and I went to with my parents when we sort of moved house and things like that. And we didn't ever raise our hands, and nobody shouted out in worship like sometimes we do at Destiny, and we have people saying hallelujah and we have people saying thank you Lord and things like that. That was never part of my childhood, and that was never part of my upbringing. And so how did I transition then from that to where I am now? And I want to tell you, because my first experience of people raising their hands was so awkward. I literally couldn't believe what was happening. I went to this youth conference sort of thing that happened every month in Edinburgh, because that's sort of where we used to live. And it was the first time I'd ever seen people like lifting their hands in worship. And I was like, what is going on? What are they doing? This is really weird. This is really bizarre. And I was really scared because I felt really conscious of myself because, oh my goodness, I feel the pressure to have to do this. And so I'm now feeling a bit embarrassed because I'm actually scared to. And now I feel like sort of the only one who's not doing it and everyone's looking at me, and this is really awkward. But obviously the church I went with, all of my friends from our youth group were feeling exactly the same because we weren't from a church that raised their hands or sort of expressed their worship in any other way apart from we sing the lyrics of the song and then we sit down. We went to this place and people were lifting their hands, and so that was my first experience. My first experience of it wasn't, wow, this is great, this is really easy to do, and this makes me feel good. You know, lots of people, lots of my friends now were brought up in sort of Pentecostal churches and churches that were more open to things like that. And so now it's become a bit normal, but that was my first experience, was I really feel self-conscious. And so from there, I went back to my own church and we carried on, and we went back to what was normal. And then the next month came round, because it was a monthly event, and it would happen again. And I was like, oh my goodness, I enjoy going to this place, but I feel really awkward in worship because everybody else is doing something that I'm not. And you might be thinking right now, well, that's a really negative thing. That's a real negative thing. And because, you know, people shouldn't make you feel like that. You shouldn't be made to feel like that in a worship session. And you know what? I understand why some people might think that. But actually, the only person that cared was me. There wasn't anybody else around me that was bothered that I wasn't lifting my hands. None of the other people who had their hands raised, eyes closed, and were singing gave a monkeys about what I was doing. And not because they were selfish or horrible people, but actually they were having their moment of worship and worshipping God for themselves in that moment. And I was the only person who was making me feel insecure in that moment. And so actually I can't pass the blame onto anybody else because that was their expression of worship. And the first big moment for me was when I went on a year away with Youth for Christ, like a youth work sort of time. And in that moment, I was all of a sudden taken away from all of my friends nearby and my parents as well, and I was on my own. And I went to this place with these people I didn't know in a setting that I was unsure of, and all of a sudden there was a little bit of freedom for me to test the waters. And so what happened was, in the times of worship that we would have at this in this year away, I would test it out, and I'd be like, you know, doing like, I don't know if you've ever seen the pictures, they've given the funny names to how people lift their hands. So you've got like the goalposts, which is like this, and then you've got the, you know, I can't remember what they were called, but however you lift your hands, there was like a funny name given to it. And I was like trying out this one, like the tiny little, I'm gonna lift my hands, but I'm gonna make sure that nobody can really see it because I don't want to be embarrassed. So I'm gonna put it like here. I'm gonna lift my hands like here. And it's funny, isn't it? Because now we don't think about it, especially at Destiny. And I don't know what it's like in your church if you're watching from another church, but it's like it's not a big deal anymore. But then, and I'm sure for a lot of people, it still is a big deal. So I was trying this little thing, and then eventually, as the year went on, as the year grew, and I grew in what I thought was normal, and the more I would lift my hands and the more I would sort of say out loud other things that weren't on the screen being projected as the official lyrics of the song. For me, it was a bit like being thrown in at the deep end because they were so open, the organisation I went with and the people that were around me. And I'm sure there were people who were there who also felt awkward. And it wasn't, at first, it wasn't a, oh man, I really want to lift my hands. But it sort of became a, I want to lift my hands. And the more I did it, the more sort of free I felt. To the point, I would argue, that I actually don't care what the person next to me thinks of me. So this is sort of how my journey with lifting hands and being a little bit more free in worship begun. And the more I did it, the more I did it, if that makes sense. I can't really put it any other way. The more I did it, the more I was inclined to do it. But there was an interesting side effect as well. Because the more I did it, the less I was caring about what the people around me thought. Does that make sense? So the more I opened myself up and opened up my body language, the less I cared about the other people that were around me and how they were judging me. I want people to understand that if I'm ever in a situation where a church doesn't lift their hands normally and I am there as a sort of a one-off, or I'm visiting or whatever, if they don't lift their hands and if they don't sort of say other things in worship, then I will choose not to as well. And I don't think that is me stifling my worship. What I am doing though is being respectful. Because a lot of times I've seen people sort of bust into a church who is not expecting it, and they're sort of dancing in the aisle, and they're dancing at the back, and they're pumping their fists, and what they're doing is that they're making that church feel really awkward, because all of a sudden nobody is focusing on God. They're all focusing on that crazy person who is lifting their hands in worship. What is going on? You know? So I never do that out of a sense of respect for that church, because I think it's really important that we never make other people feel uncomfortable. What I want to do, what I wanted to get out of this, I've sort of rambled a little bit, but I wanted to give you a little bit of knowledge and background about my journey from being very, very, very conservative in how I worship to where I am now. And what I wanted to do, what I want this to do, is encourage people to give it a try. There are so many verses in the Bible that reference dancing in worship, and that may jar some people, and that you might say, well, that's just not me. And I understand that logic, I understand that line, because I said that sentence over and over again throughout my teenage years and my childhood. That's just not me. Well, it turns out it is me. It turns out maybe I am that guy. And I didn't think I was, but there's so many references, and I did think about gathering some up, but man, there are so many that talk about dancing in worship, playing instruments in worship, drums and guitars and stringed instruments and cymbals, loud cymbals as well. There's so many references to lifting hands to God in the Bible, in the New and the Old Testament. And I just think, why don't we give it a go? If you're not the kind of person who would give it a go, or you don't think you are, I encourage you just to try. And there's a couple of reasons that I want you to try. And it's reasons that I've found in my own experience. And do you know what's really interesting? And many of you might not know who my mum and dad are, and if you do, I'm sorry, mum and dad, for embarrassing you. But not only have I been through this journey, but I have witnessed my parents go through this journey as well, to the point where they're at the sort of the same place as where I am, and where the majority, of Destiny Church feel comfortable as well. So here's a couple of reasons why I think you should do it. Firstly, it's in the Bible. And I think if anything's in the Bible, we should really start to question, well, why is that there? If we're not questioning why is that there, then I think we're doing injustice to the things that are written down in God's Word. Why is that there if it's not important? That's the first thing. The second thing is, you are worshipping God every day, and you've heard me say this a million times. We worship with our actions. We worship with our decisions that we make. We honour God through the good decisions, the righteous things that we decide to do. And when we come to sung congregational worship, I think that nothing is off limits there either. I think our hands symbolise something. Our hands symbolise an abandonment to God, and that you are saying, God, I understand that you are bigger than me. I think it's also a symbol of lifting him up as well. We sing lots of songs that lift God high and they magnify God. And this symbol is actually one of those, isn't it? It's that I'm lifting you high and I am abandoning myself. But here's the third thing as well. As I started to lift my hands on my journey towards where I am now, and I've still got, I'm not saying I've ended my journey, by the way, I've got a lot more growing I need to do, as does everybody, in their worship to God. But what this does is it helps my head. And I say this about standing up in worship as well, if you're able. Standing up and lifting your hands, it does something to your mind. And it says, I'm going to focus on God right now. I'm not going to worry about what other people are doing. I'm not going to worry about what I'm having for Sunday lunch and that my dinner's in the oven. My roast is in the oven. I think less and less people are having a roast on a Sunday now than ever, aren't they? But I'm not thinking about my life, my worries, my concerns right now, because now is a time when I'm going to honor God. And I personally, and I can't speak for everybody, but I personally think and feel for myself that when I raise my hands, something clicks in me that says I've got one focus right now. I've got one thing that I'm thinking about, and that is lifting my God high, because he deserves the worship. He's bigger than any single problem that I've got going on right now. He's bigger than anything that's going to happen in my future. And he's bigger than all the mistakes I've made in the past. And God, you deserve the glory this morning. And sometimes people don't do these kind of things at first because they just think there's something a bit false about it. There's lots of arguments that are made about emotion coming into worship and coming into the church, and that's a real negative thing. But what I found is my most sort of abandoned, and I don't like to use this word, great worship moments, because every worship moment is it's just based on me and what I have decided to give to God. So there's nothing amazing and tingly and weird about it. But some of my best worship moments is when I have had one thing that I've been thinking about, and that is lifting God high. And when I do that, when I really come and focus on that with my eyes closed, I don't have to have my eyes closed, but sometimes that helps me focus, and my hands raised, and I've been overcome with the love of God because I'm focusing on him. And actually, the more I focus on him, the more I realize that he loves me, the more I realize what he did for me. And now I'm at the place where I can't help but lift my hands. And when I think about God and who he is, and I know I will never understand the fullness of him, and I'll never understand the fullness of his love, but when I focus on him in worship now, when I come and I have one thing in my head, and that is lifting him high, I can't help but lift my hands. And I pray, and I hope that this little video has helped you a little bit. And what I want to do is encourage you to start and try. Just start the ball rolling a little bit. Because once you start, it gets easier and it gets easier, and eventually you might be at the place where you just can't help it anymore. And I'm at the place where I really couldn't care less if somebody thought I was crazy for lifting my hands, because there's only one person I care about. There's only one person that I am bothered about, and that is God. And I want to please him with everything I'm doing. And I'm not saying that people who don't lift their hands are not pleasing God. Please don't misinterpret this video. But all I want to do is encourage you to do something that I think will aid your worship. And it's not like some people are worse and some people are better. I want to give you some more tools to help you worship your God. That's it. Nothing more complicated than that. I just wanted to give you my experience and my little journey of not lifting hands to now being someone who just can't help it anymore. So we're going to raise up holy hands because great is his faithfulness. What a great song. Where's my guitar? Where's my guitar? Is it in tune? Pass. I don't know. What do we think? Plectrum. Essential. Now, this is not an exercise. This is not me saying, hey, why don't you try it now? However, if you do want to try it out now, man, feel free. Feel free today. Just make sure I'm in the right key. Great is your faithfulness. Great is your faithfulness. You never change, you never fail, oh God. Oh, true are your promises, true are your promises, true are your promises. You never change, you never fail, oh God. Oh, so we raise up holy hands and to praise the Holy One who was and is to come. So we raise up holy hands and to praise the Holy One who was and is to come. Oh, wide is your love, wide is your love and grace, wide is your love and grace. You never change, you never fail, oh God. Wide is your love, wide is your love and grace, wide is your love and grace. You never change, you never fail, oh God. Oh, so we raise up holy hands and to praise the Holy One who was and is to come. So we raise up holy hands and to praise the Holy One who was and is to come. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yes we will, yes we will. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you've been able to get something out of it. Remember, I am really not saying that anything is better than the other. All I want to do is encourage people to have more tools in their weaponry, as it were, or more tools in their tool bag to worship God. Because I know actually all anybody's heart is within this is to worship God in the best way they possibly can and the way that they find is best for them. And for me, best for me is lifting my hands. And if that's not for you, then that's okay. But I would encourage you to just give it a go and see how you feel, see what you think. This is the end of this week's Worship Spotlight. It has been a long one and I am sorry for that. I had just felt like I had a lot on my heart to say. So until next time, see you later. So we raise up holy hands and to praise the Holy One who was and is to come. So we raise up holy hands and to praise